Okay, well, today we've come to the stump, and the stump is basically a place where leaders go out and have a seat and talk about things and talk about a myriad of topics. My name is Rick Barton. I'll be hosting today, and joined with me today is Alan Jarbo, the Chief Strategy and Chief Financial Officer for CalCo Cutaways. So, welcome, Alan, to the show.
Thanks, Rick. I'm a licensed attorney in Illinois. As Rick said, I'm Alan Jarbo. Spent my career last 20 years as a CFO at various companies in different industries, different sizes. So for good or bad, I have a lot of practical experience in this topic that we're about to discuss.
Great, and the topic today is about accountability. And I thought the path we take is really look at what is accountability, kind of come to some kind of definition. And then what are some examples of where accountability failed and for whatever reason? And then what would be some recommendations you'd have to be able to say, how do you foster an environment of an accountability? Does that sound like a good path?
Sounds great to me. The simple definition of accountability is really an obligation or a willingness to accept responsibility for one's actions. It sounds real simple until you apply that in an organization with more than one person, right? So even small businesses with 10 people or large companies with tens of thousands, accountability can really fall apart pretty quick, or it can excel in the right company culture.
So along with taking responsibility for one's behavior or actions, what about owning some outcomes or results? I mean, in your experience, is it kind of a mix between behavior and results, or do you see it kind of strictly in one camp?
I think it's a mix of both. Really, it's a company culture having a clear focus on what it wants to accomplish at a company level, and then being able to drill that down into a clear focus and tasks of what's expected of everyone in their roles. And I find that quite often, without a clear expectation of what's expected of someone, especially performance, can really impact accountability.
So let's go ahead and let's talk about the times that it doesn't work, because we've all had those kind of situations where accountability is just not there. You get that people pointing fingers and blaming and things like that. What are some of the factors based on your experience where what are those things that cause accountability to fail?
I think most people, first of all, think of accountability as really more of a corrective measure when they don't do something right, instead of having a clear focus and goal of what's expected of them, and that they are proud to do that and accomplish it, and therefore, contribute their part to their colleagues, to their managers, and to the company's overall goal, right? So if it's oftentimes thought of corrective action, it's more of a negative connotation than positive. And I find what really contributes to that primarily is leadership from the top and the company culture that leaders create at the very top, and then how that trickles down throughout the organization.
Do you think there's like a false sense of accountability where some people actually think they're accountable and maybe they really aren't and are not, and they take over different levels of responsibility? It becomes confusing. That'd be kind of one way where accountability could fail. Do you have any experience where there was a misunderstanding of who owns what?
Yeah, I think it's easy to, especially in smaller companies where people might wear multiple hats. I found in the larger businesses, it might be a little easier when you've got departments, you have a department manager and a staff, and their roles are pretty well defined and institutionalized. But when in smaller businesses where everyone wears multiple hats, I find it can be a little more confusing, and maybe the roles are a little more abstract for people. So it's important to really kind of clearly define what the role is, what are the goals, and then the metrics on how to really understand, have you succeeded at what you needed to do for that day, for the week, for the month?
So let's go and let's stay with that because talking about when it fails, now let's look at what are those things that foster accountability. And do you have any tools that you use in your organization or in previous organizations that's kind of help clarify roles and responsibilities, especially accountabilities?
Again, I find this sounds a bit abstract, but the leadership and the culture is really important. But having a very well written job description, having the right set of tools and technology is important, because the jobs are just getting, I find, bigger, harder, more complicated. The world's moving much faster than it feels like it ever used to. And I think during this current pandemic, we found, what feels like normal can unravel pretty quickly. So I find it's important to have really clear expectations from sales goals, activity goals, metrics, KPIs, and then good apps or platforms to be able to accumulate all that data and to measure it without spending a lot of time.
Great. You mentioned having clear goals as a guiding philosophy for ensuring that people are clear about what their responsibilities are. Many times we tend to mix up responsibility versus accountability. Do you have any steadfast rules for how you clarify the difference between a responsibility and accountability?
As one thing I learned recently, there's a concept called RACI that I learned from my friend Rick Barton that really helps to define a concept called swim lanes. And it's very easy to veer off path, I think, especially in smaller businesses. If we don't understand some of the differences between responsibility and accountability, and what we're accountable for, right, in our own lane each day, but what our overall responsibilities are to the organization as a whole.
Sure. And some people would say that a responsibility could include some type of ownership of a task, whereas accountability could be ownership to a result. So it has kind of a bigger umbrella. So we've talked about accountability, kind of given a bit of a definition of it. And you talked about it as an obligation for a behavior, to a behavior, for a behavior or result. And we talked about some downsides to accountability and where it's failed. And you also gave some excellent examples about how to look at accountability, and a tool, RACI, is an example to be able to help delineate roles and responsibilities so people understand what they own. It's a complex topic in itself, accountability, but it's one we all deal with every day. I want to thank you for coming today. Is there any closing thoughts that you have?
It's a big topic, right? Accountability, but it's also one of the most important subjects within an organization. And I think it all starts with leadership and company culture. So it's important to really nail down what a company culture should look like and how to foster accountability.
Absolutely. And tune in next week when we talk about our next topic, to be determined. Thanks for coming, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
All right. Let me hit, where is